Hello, BookTube. I've got some much later mail for you. I did a bunch of videos. I've been living on this computer all day doing videos or Zoom chats, or then a video, then a Zoom chat, then a Zoom chat, then a video. And so time has passed. My position has changed. The light in the room has changed. We have a little mail at the afternoon on a bright, sunny, mild day here in Boston. It has been very mild. We are not scheduled to get anything like any touch of this monstrous winter storm that is striking so much of the rest of the country. Thursday and Friday, Boston might get a little warm rain. The way we will share in this storm with the rest of the country is what follows. There's a gigantic drop in temperature, an Arctic blast of air. Some places in the upper Midwest will have 50 or 60 degrees below zero wind chills. And Boston looks like it will get some of that, maybe early next week. It's the data, the raw data that comes after that confuses me. Because my reading of it, of course, I'm not a professional, I'm not Matthew Capucci, but my reading of it could not possibly be right. If my reading is right, if by any chance weather next week or late next week going into the week after that is the way that data makes it look, then some of you are going to owe me an apology. Some of you, I did a tag the other day and I mentioned, oh no, it wasn't tag, it was best contemporary classics that you must read. And I mentioned that I thought the 21st century hadn't thrown its haymakers at us yet. The century is still young, in other words, and has probably a lot bigger catastrophes than even 9/11 or the COVID pandemic. And I mentioned the climate as one of those. And I mentioned what I consider to be a very strong likelihood that sometime in the early 2030s, the climate will collapse. And human life will be radically, radically altered everywhere in the world as a result of that. Because even if you live in a place where the climate is relatively stable even after that, your environment is still going to be badly disrupted by a million immigrants from places that have been disrupted. And some of you said I was being an alarmist. Could be. I hope I am. But the weather that's coming, if I'm right in interpreting it, and I don't see how I could be, is certainly going to make some of you owe me an apology. If I can be walking my dog in shorts and sandals on 12th night in Boston, then I don't think there's any conclusion but one to be drawn from what 12th night in 2033 will be like. If that's what it's like in 2023, I don't think you can make a case. We shall see. We shall see. Or maybe we won't. This year is coming to an end. I will soon be entering what you Whovians refer to as my regeneration. If I am back to do tedious weather reports in the new year, we will reconvene and compare notes. But in the meantime, we have periodicals and a package. So this mail haul won't be long. One periodical is Harper's, which has a couple of interesting things in it. It's Joy Williams, the novelist Joy Williams, who gets what I consider to be completely thankless task that every major organ has to assign. I mentioned this in a few recent videos. Cormac McCarthy has 2 new novels, one in October and one in December. And if you are the literary editor of a major venue, Harper's, The Atlantic, Vanity Fair, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, you have to get somebody to write a piece about that. It is baked in to Cormac McCarthy's current reputation as a writer that if he writes anything, you need to block out that time. For his second book, or first book, either one, in the month that either one of these 2 novels came out, I could point you to 10 novels that infinitely more deserve the time and space and attention that would benefit an actual good writer as opposed to Cormac McCarthy, who certainly is not one. But nevertheless, it is as mechanical as a wind-up clock, and Joy Williams got that job in this issue, as we'll see. But there were a bunch of other things in here that were interesting and infuriating, and I want to read you a couple of excerpts from a couple of those, just so that you know what it's like for Steve to read his periodicals. There was a long article in here about the towns that exist to house gigantic wind farms or solar panel farms, how that's changing the location of the locals. But Mark Edmondson, who ordinarily I like, did a piece called Truth Takes a Vacation about Donald Trump and his relationship to the truth, about Donald Trump's followers and their relationship to the truth. And there was a 2-paragraph spread that had me so livid that I have calmed down quite a bit, believe it or not. I want to read you those 2 paragraphs. Does Trump know he lost the election? In a way, it's an absurd question. It's a mistake to ask what Trump really thinks about X or Y. Confronted with an issue, he aims and fires, or sometimes he fires then aims. Is Trump a racist? Is Trump a sexist? Is Trump a patriot? Is Trump an advocate of freedom? Trump is not anything. He is what will get him what he wants at any given moment. He aligns himself with what he senses will advance his cause, and his cause is himself. What about Trump's followers? Do they really believe what they say about the election? Again, wrong question. Trump's followers are in the pragmatic search that truth has gone on, are in on the pragmatic secret that truth with a capital T has gone on vacation. Stop the steal isn't a statement of belief. These words are pragmatic weapons. They discomfort liberals. They set the stage for disruption down the line when elections don't go the MAGA way, and even when they do. The words also function as a password, letting everyone know who is in the club. Something similar could be said about the QAnon conspiracy and other bits of Baroque alt-right outrageousness. To judge them as pictures of some objective external reality is to misunderstand their purpose. Cornel West says that pragmatism is about 3 things: power, personality, and provocation. The stolen election mantra has no capital T truth, but it does have all 3 of these. I'm infuriated all over again. Are we absolving Donald Trump of being a racist and a sexist? Are we absolving him of lying? If you're absolving him of having any relationship with truth with a capital T, then he cannot tell a lie. And maybe lies can't be told. It is the ultimate, absolutely essential first step in capitulation to fascism to say, what is fascism really? What is it really? I mean, do we know, really? If truth is on vacation, truth never takes a vacation. To say that the Trump followers who are shouting, stop the steal, don't really believe it, is either setting yourself up for the mother of all disillusionments, or it's paving the way for that. There is no way to write this kind of garbage innocently anymore. I would argue there wasn't a way to do that with think pieces that started appearing in January of 2017. But now, there is no way to write this kind of flapdoodle innocently. You are either too stupid to get a byline in Harper's, or you are complicit with the fascist regime that wants to take over this country. No middle ground at all. For you to go on 2 paragraphs, and the piece goes on like this for a lot more than 2 paragraphs, saying that Trump doesn't really know what lying is, that he isn't really lying, that you're asking the wrong question. If you ask whether or not his followers believe that the election was stolen, enraging. Absolutely enraging. Now, there was one other thing in this issue that also enraged me. And since we're talking, there was a long article in here, believe it or not, on urine. Don't always know what's going on in the Harper's offices. But the other thing that enraged me, predictably, was that Joy Williams piece on Cormac McCarthy. And I want to read you just a bit of it so that you know what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about when I say that these pieces were written years ago and don't need to be changed ever. They don't make any sense. And they're not about a moral writer. So they don't need to be changed. You only need to add in names. Well, what's an actual character name from Stella Maris? It doesn't even have to be a consistent character name because they're not consistent in the book. The characters don't act consistently in the book. So what difference does it make what you say about them? But there's one little stretch here, 2-paragraph stretch here that perfectly captures not only this type of mausoleum writing that McCarthy is eliciting literally everywhere, but also the experience of reading his books. It goes like this. The Passenger, which is one of the 2 novels, is McCarthy's 11th novel. 11, the master number. Capital M, capital N. Each book has been linguistically astounding. I agree, but not in the way you think. Of the first three, The Orchard Keeper, Outer Dark, and Child of God, the critic John Aldridge, who found McCarthy's genius bizarre, noted that though the lexical chemistry language established itself as authoritative character, declaring its sovereignty over the other characters by creating a context in which they take on a richness of meaning that they do not in themselves possess. What the hell does that mean? I don't know, but it goes on. Sutri, somewhat of an indulgence, a romp. It's that Joy Williams unironically calls Sutri a romp. A Knoxville picaresque closed out the 70s. In the 80s saw Blood Meridian, his vicious masterwork. Harold Bloom placed it in his canon of American sublime, considering the figure of the judge to be violence incarnate. And short of Moby Dick, the most monstrous apparition in all of American literature. A cartoon supervillain. Okay. And then the piece goes on. At the time, I lent my copy to my friend, the musician Eric von Schmidt. I can't remember now what he said he thought about it when he returned it, but for some reason he had written a personal provisions list in the previously blank front piece. Flypaper, bullets, fish, salad. He had a beautiful hand, befitting an artist. That's supposed to mean something, with a capital M, with a very much capital M, with a capital M as big as Mount Rushmore. That's supposed to mean something. Gnomic utterances, weird, random, but very practical. It's a provisions list. If it were a list of thoughts, it wouldn't have interested anyone in a context of Cormac McCarthy. But somebody wrote fishing, salad, red checker tablecloth. And then when you, as some sort of coda to why that would matter at all, why you would be bothering to tell readers of a review, a book review, any of that, you talk about how he had, what he was like as an artist. Your friend that you lent the book to. Because, he was, when he read the McCarthy, even though there's no evidence of it whatsoever, it must have put him in touch with elemental things. That must have prompted his provisions list. Yeah, man. Yeah, a lug nut. A red checker tablecloth. Yeah, totally. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, I don't hold much truck with Joy Williams as a book reviewer, but I would like to think that her and everyone else who's turned out pieces of crap like that in the last month will be hardly embarrassed by them in a few years. I don't know. Maybe they won't be. Ridiculous. But that wasn't the worst of it, or the periodicals. Another periodical was the TLS, the Times Literary Supplement. And I go to the letters page for the TLS to see if there's an ongoing beef. I always expect that there will be one. There isn't always one. And usually when it happens, it is surprising. The front page article of the TLS is about the Liberals, about Sir Keir Starmer. This is an opinion piece by Tom Clark about Labour's long road to power. That was a little depressing on its own because I automatically thought of the really smart kids at Novara Media. And also of Owen Jones, who's a Novara adjacent in one particularly graphic way. I thought about them and how Labour comes to power. It's what they've been cheering for and wanting, allegedly wanting all this time. When it finally does happen, they'll have nothing positive to say about it at all. They'll vote Labour, but they won't have anything positive to say because they simp for authoritarianism. They love it. They want it to happen. I guess because they dream of being bomb-throwing barricade manners, but they won't do that. That was bad enough, but the letters page had, oh my. Now, this is a saga that we have actually followed. Because the TLS ran a review of Jared Kushner's book. The book that Jared Kushner had whipped out of a cringing subordinate as he could put his name on it. And I argued at the time that I saw that the TLS editorial board should have said, no, we're not going to give a review, much less a full-page review of attention, to this noxious, horrible artifact and this creature of nepotism and evil. We're not going to do it. We're just going to ignore the book rather than give it even a long negative review. The long negative review by Dwight Garner that famously panned the book generated enormous numbers of sales. I argued against that, and then somebody wrote in and defended Jared Kushner. and the reviewer of the book reposted. uh, the reviewer of the book was well. Let me just read you, because the repost from the reviewer has got a repost of its own from the original writer of the letter, Edward Lookrock. So we're at week number 4 of Jared Kushner Exchange, and this is the latest one. Robert Pounder challenges my description of Michael Wolff's review of Jared Kushner's memoir. So you see, we've had many different voices chiming in here. As a grotesque misinterpretation of the book and the person. He writes that when Kushner negotiated with 7 Arab countries to open relations with Israel, he went behind the backs of the CIA and the U.S. State Department. That is absolutely true, and he wasn't negotiating with them for what this author says. This is the guy, Edward Lookrock's the guy who wrote in to defend Kushner in the first place. And he's not done. He's continuing to do it. Mr. Pounder is certainly right. Kushner acted solo and did not inform or seek the support of the CIA or the U.S. State Department, and more specifically the state's Near East Bureau and the CIA's equivalent, both of which for decades have kept explaining to successive U.S. administrations that it was utterly impossible to persuade the leaders of any Arab country to open diplomatic relations with Israel until the Palestinians had been themselves reached a peaceful agreement with Israel. Hence, it was pointless to try. Does that sound like anything to you? The deep state is what that sounds like. That is what Edward Lookrock is seriously, non-ironically invoking. For decades, U.S. officials, usually White House political appointees, who thought otherwise, were efficiently diverted because U.S. officials, politically appointed or not, cannot go behind the backs of the CIA and the U.S. State Department. They can't. If they're not the presidents, it's illegal. I don't know why he's putting it in scare quotes. You want your nation's foreign policy run by Jared effing Kushner? I don't. Kushner's irreducible merit. Can you believe? In 2023, going on 2023, someone using that kind of language about Jared Kushner, an unbelievably evil and corrupt president's unbelievably evil and corrupt son-in-law. Jared Kushner's irreducible merit is that he ignored the impossibility theorem, met the leaders, and discovered that in Morocco, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, and the United Arab Emirates, there was greater interest in participating in Israel's high-tech economy, that in some countries Israel was viewed as Iran's most active counterweight, and that in others the prospect of trade and tourism loomed large. The intent, because Jared Kushner was busily going to all of those countries fact-finding. The intense opposition back in Washington, I don't know. Could it have a coordinated opposition? Could it perhaps be the deep state? And I don't know. Does the deep state all have a kind of ethnic religion? Maybe. Is anybody in the deep state celebrating Christmas? I wonder if Edward Lookrock thinks that. The intense opposition back in Washington was a factor in the decisions of Oman and Qatar to continue their long-standing secret relations with Israel. Sudan's decision awaits a new president, but the others went ahead and have since added broadening economic relations, including much tourism. Mr. Pounder also charges me with suppressio veri for having failed to mention that Kushner has received more than $2 billion from the Saudis and others for a private financial venture. Pounder states as fact something I only heard about after I wrote my letter, and which remains a rumor. It does not remain a rumor. Unless you are discounting Washington Post and New York Times and Wall Street Journal reporting that you don't like. But in any case, the rumor is irrelevant. Because of his irreducible merit, you are willing to excuse him literally anything. If he was bribed by the Saudis with blood money, these are the people who a prince, their ruler, authorized the luring, the torturing, and the killing of a Washington Post columnist. And you look the other way. Jared Kushner looked the other way when he knew that was going to happen. He didn't learn about it afterwards. He knew it was going to happen. And he didn't fail to stop it from happening because he had a long, deep, irreducibly meritorious vision of peace in the Middle East. He wanted money. He wanted Saudi money, huge amounts of it, to save a venture capital bungle of his own that couldn't be saved any other way. And he did not care where the money came from. But in any case, the rumor is irrelevant. If the U.S. had paid the Saudis, as it has paid governments worldwide to do things over the years, that would have been relevant. I don't know how you get to be this stupid unless you are just defiantly partisan And maybe Edward Luttwak is. So if the U.S. had paid the Saudis or been paid by them, that would be different. But Jared Kushner? Well, I don't see why the rumor is even relevant. Wonder, what was Jared Kushner's relationship to the U.S. government when he was doing all these secret, irreducibly meritorious negotiations behind the State Department's back against the law? What was his relationship to the U.S. government? Oh, he's a special counsel to the president. Oh, okay. So it was the U.S. government involved. Oh, okay. Well, but what difference does that make? Maybe he was off on his own hook. After all, what was his relationship to the president of the United States, the person who can personally make foreign policy? Oh, what's that you say? He's married to the president's daughter. But the U.S. didn't have any involvement of this, regardless of the rumor. I would consider it purely funny if it weren't so horrifyingly evil. And it's so clear a sign of things to come. Luttwak is not a moron. He might be saying moronic things, but he has books to his credit. He's not a moron. If he can say this, that means that in 20 years, lots of people will be saying it and writing it in flagrant violation of the facts. I don't care what the facts are. Here was the virtuous shining prince in this whole endeavor. And no matter what you say about the Trump administration, no matter how you nail them onto a cross of gold, you can't impute anything negative to the invincible, irreducible merit of Jared Kushner. So I'm hoping that Michael Wolff writes a response. I'm hoping that he does. If he doesn't, I'm hoping somebody else does. And keep this thing going. Absolutely, keep it going. But in addition to that, in addition to the periodicals, we also have one package. We'll do one package. I imagine it will be a release for 2023, and then we'll be done. So, because mail hauls don't have to take 40 minutes, despite me going on and on about the mail. They don't have to take 40 minutes. Okay, this is a finished copy. What is this? What is this? Okay, it has a note on it. Interesting. Okay, so this comes out in January. This is a January release, a new release. It's called Stayed on Freedom: The Long History of Black Power Through One Family's Journey by Dan Berger. Stayed on Freedom. Huge amounts of blurbs on it here. Black power has many connotations in its multitudes as a philosophy, an orientation, and a social movement that, since its inception, has been met with violent opposition, fear, and hatred. But perhaps the single quality that fuels it is the one most often overlooked. Black power is a global expression of love. And it goes on here. I'm doing this with one hand because of the ergonomics of the room. Through the story of two little-known organizers, Zohara and Michael Simmons, we access a window to the endurance and experimentation of Black power across space and time. After meeting in 1965 in Atlanta as members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Memphis-born Zohara, then Gwen, and the Philadelphia-born Michael traveled the country and the world to carry the fight for freedom and equality and to build their familial and personal connections among political lives. From hours of interviews with friends, family, and activists, the years of knowing the once married couple, the author relates, they aren't married anymore, but the author knew them both. The author relates a living and loving history of what has become an emblematic symbol for the pursuit of justice, and to see it as, quote, a potent way to understand the long-haul commitments of those who join and sustain the fight for freedom. Okay. So it has bullet points here. One bullet point is the dynamism of Black power, showing that it is love that unites people with the ongoing struggle for freedom, even as circumstances and practices change, from research and interviews with family, friends, and activists carrying the fight well into the 21st century. Also the global reach of the Black power movement. Okay. And the author is a professor of comparative ethnic studies and associate dean for faculty development at the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences at the University of Washington, Bothell. And he lives in Seattle. Okay. Well, this is a January release. Not quite sure what to do with the note. The note is from a publicist who I know, who mentions that it's not my usual beat. I guess he's true about that. He knows my usual beat, so I guess he's true about that. It's going to be, okay, two things. about that. One, it's going to be the usual beat of a lot of you. Now you know this is coming in January in finished copy. From a guy who not only teaches this sort of stuff on a professional level, but knew the people he's talking about. He's interviewed everybody. So this is groundbreaking primary research in addition to whatever kind of narrative he shapes out of it. So that's one thing. This isn't my usual beat, but it will be the usual beat of one or two of you. And two, if it's well done, I will add it to my beat. so there you go. It's a fascinating subject. So that is our book. So we have a book and a Jeremiah ad against the penny press, and that is it. This is all the videos that you're getting from me today. It's just this. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Well, just this, I should say, and also a raucous fun talk on CPL Radio, which I think I'm now listing in all of my show notes. But we have an episode every weekday, and today's was raucous. Lots and lots of fun. So there's that, and there's these videos. But that's it. Until tomorrow. I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.